A country doesn't usually agree on anything within an hour. Football, weather, tea versus coffee. Whether the last decade's been kind to anyone, pick nearly any topic and you'll find an argument waiting somewhere. But on Wednesday night, somewhere close to 10 o'clock, a single piece of news landed. And by midnight, nearly the entire nation had reached the exact same conclusion, without a single planning call between any of them.
Yeah, they've changed their mind. They've changed their mind, Richard, because they realize they're not making the money. They're hated in Hollywood. They're not even invited to the Oscars or the Emmys. So King Charles has to wake up, okay? Because the idea that Harry and Meghan are coming back here just to be private citizens is delusional.
Harry and Meghan are apparently relocating permanently this month. Removal vans, school enrollment, the full package. Remember what these two told the world back in 2020 and repeated across nearly every available platform for years afterward. Britain broke her, they said. The press here nearly killed her. This country carries something rotten in it. Something they needed an entire ocean's worth of distance to escape properly.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were to Megxit the most unhappy royal homecoming in history. Yes, they are on their way back, folks. The dastardly duo, the fake Duke and Duchess, have tonight confirmed a return to the United Kingdom. They informed King Charles on Sunday.
That was the pitch that sold everything downstream of it. The book deal, the streaming series, interview after interview, all resting on the premise that leaving was the only way to survive. Now they're apparently coming back to live among the people they described that way. So the obvious question landing across breakfast tables Thursday morning wasn't really a question at all. It was closer to disbelief. Piers Morgan floated the idea of leaving the country himself. Megyn Kelly shot back across the Atlantic that America had done its time hosting them. Thank you very much. Meghan McCain skipped the diplomacy entirely. Nobody here cared about faded royalty, she said. And Britain was welcome to the problem now. Lee Cohen needed exactly one word for his reaction: Armageddon. None of these people coordinated. That's precisely the point.
Prince William exploded, and can you blame him? Absolutely not.
When an entire country's commentary class independently reaches for the same panic within the same hour, something real is happening underneath it. The polling backed up the gut reaction almost immediately. Something close to 9 in 10 people surveyed that night said no, plainly, when asked whether they wanted this specific homecoming. Not hesitant, not conflicted, no. And scroll down far enough under the coverage, past thousands of comments arguing every angle imaginable, and one line kept rising above the rest. 3 words, repeated by strangers who'd never spoken to each other. William, stand strong.
They're coming back, not next year, not even in the autumn. They are returning at the end of this month. Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lily are coming back to Britain in the next few days. Their stay is expected to be a lengthy one, several years, because Archie and Lily are going to enter the British education system.
That's genuinely the whole story compressed into a single sentence. Audacity, answered by the public in real time. So let's say plainly what most coverage keeps carefully dancing around instead of stating outright. Nobody involved actually wants this specific outcome if you strip away the official statements. Not the country reading about it over morning coffee. Not the palace quietly managing the fallout behind closed doors. Not the brother left holding an entire institution together on his own. Not, by several accounts, even the woman supposedly boarding that particular plane herself. One person wants it. One tired king said yes anyway, despite everything working against that decision. And it's happening regardless of who actually wanted it in the first place.
What have we always said? The biggest risk, P. Dinah, for Prince Harry is to want to leave that woman while they are in California, because she would get custody of the children and he would not be able to return. So there is a lot going on here, P. Dinah, and I think a big part of this is Harry preparing for his post-divorce world, where he has the children in the United Kingdom. Because guess what? He's stupid, but when he reads in Vanity Fair, confirmation of a report that I first made, P. Dinah, that his wife is shopping around a post-divorce autobiography, surely that's when you wake up and you say, I can't stay here.
Peter Hunt covered the royal family for the BBC across years that taught him genuine restraint. He doesn't reach for dramatic language casually, and colleagues describe him as someone who chooses each word with real deliberation before it goes anywhere near a broadcast. So when he predicted William's private reaction, the word he chose mattered considerably more than it might from a less careful source: apoplectic. Then he added something that should have kept every palace advisor awake through the night: This move creates the real possibility of two competing royal operations functioning simultaneously: William's household and Harry's. Both technically loyal to one crown that can't actually hold two centers of gravity at once without something eventually giving way.
I can't stay here. She is setting me up.
So he's forcing her. He's forcing her hand. I'm going back with the children.
I agree.
This is why it was so sudden. This is exactly why it's so sudden. What's Meghan going to do if Harry says, I'm going back with the kids? What is she going to do? He has every legal right to go back with these children. Meghan doesn't want to go, but now her cards have been played. She doesn't have a chance now, because now this is going to be on UK soil.
Tom Sykes called it a direct insult to William, full stop. Then he asked the question nobody inside that building has an answer for. What happens the first time Charles invites Harry for Christmas dinner? What happens when Harry decides he'd like to attend Remembrance Sunday after all? Sykes finished with a line that's been repeated everywhere since. There's simply no version of this the late Queen would have tolerated for a single afternoon. Anyone who remembers how she actually operated knows that's not exaggeration. Robert Jobson doesn't cover this family from the outside looking in. He sits inside the rota, close enough to the actual sourcing that his words carry noticeably different weight than most commentary circulating online. His description, a divided crown. The worst rupture inside this family in 90 years, he said, reaching all the way back to the abdication for a proper historical comparison.
And on hearing this news tonight, I just urge Prince William and Catherine to stay strong. The public are with you. The British public do not want these chancers and grifters and no good people who actually have been on a campaign to destroy the British royal family back on British soil. This is a nightmare they must not win.
Sit with that reference for a full second before moving on. That's not a casual, throwaway historical footnote deployed for dramatic effect. That's the single most serious constitutional crisis this monarchy has survived within living memory, and it's the exact comparison a veteran royal correspondent reached for without any apparent hesitation whatsoever. But here's the detail that actually turns your stomach, and it has nothing to do with constitutional theory. Word from inside William's own household is that nobody there has forgotten what followed the Oprah interview. The online abuse, the threats, all of it landing on a woman who was already, by most accounts, struggling more than the public understood at the time.
I think this was Harry making a very abrupt decision to go back. Just yesterday, reports are talking about how he's going to go back more often to the UK. He was already planning to go to the UK and then come back. And I think something has happened because they are not aligned in purpose. Don't think it's Harry and Meghan making this joint decision. This is Harry alone making this decision. And now Meghan is going to have to follow, because I think there is a problem with this as a couple. They are not in union.
What's reportedly moving into their county isn't simply a relative. It's the entire weather system that follows wherever this specific couple goes. The comment sections that night weren't gossiping. They read like people bracing for impact. One called the pair dangerous to William's family directly. Another wanted extra security posted outside their house before morning arrived. And underneath nearly every clip, the same three words kept climbing back to the top: William stands strong. Which brings us straight to Christmas, and a question nobody in that family particularly wants to answer honestly. Does William actually walk three children into Sandringham if that specific couple is seated at the table? Almost certainly not. He takes his family to the Middletons instead, quietly, and leaves the palace to explain the empty chairs however it chooses.
We know the king is still battling cancer. Catherine has had this remarkable recovery, but they needed time and space, to use a quote, to move towards fuller, more
but Harry knows time is running out, Richard. I've been saying for a long time, Harry knows that the window is closing because the moment that George comes of age, which is in about 5 years' time, Harry is a goner. This is his last window of opportunity.
Look at the actual shape of what's unfolding here, laid out plainly and without softening any of it for the sake of politeness. A man who walked away from royal duty entirely, called it a prison on international television in front of millions of viewers worldwide, and then built an entire commercial empire out of exposing the same family who raised him from childhood, has apparently relocated next door to the one brother who never left, who quietly absorbed the weight Harry set down and walked away from, without so much as a warning phone call extended beforehand as basic courtesy between siblings. There simply isn't a polite enough word in the language for that particular combination of nerve and timing. Here's what the more cautious outlets have mostly avoided printing directly. The money is reportedly evaporating faster than anyone connected to them will admit publicly. That marriage, by multiple accounts circulating through royal reporting circles, sits in considerably rockier territory than the public version suggests. And Meghan herself reportedly wasn't pushing for any of this move at all. Quite the opposite, according to multiple accounts, if the current reporting actually holds up under scrutiny in the coming weeks. Think about that specific contradiction for a moment.
I wonder whether I stay in America now. I don't want to be in England when Harry and Meghan live there, going shopping to the local supermarket. Oh, have I introduced you to my husband? I'm Meghan Markle and I'm back in England. You're welcome. I might stay in America now. I don't want to go back when they're there. Yes, it's an insult that Harry and Meghan want their kids to be British, but you are free of those two grifters. America can rebuild from here.
6 straight years of insisting she could never safely return. Too dangerous, she said repeatedly. Too cruel a country to raise children in. And she's reportedly on a flight before this particular month closes out entirely, packing up whatever remains of that carefully cultivated argument along with her. Now consider carefully what happens to her actual product once she lands back on British soil. Everything about her brand, the lifestyle content, the cooking show format, the entire commercial identity built over recent years, runs specifically on being unmistakably Californian in feel and presentation. Sunshine, open kitchens, gardens photographed at golden hour, edible flowers scattered across every surface imaginable. That's not incidental branding, that's the entire pitch.
Harry and Meghan have got exactly what they want, which is they've enjoyed the privacy of traveling to the United States, living in a private home, of course, living their lives as they see fit, making money. So they're days away from returning, days away from tearing up that agreement, which was conducted and drawn up in good faith by the late Queen. Poor Elizabeth is no longer here to enforce that deal and to defend the legacy of her time as Queen.
So how does a Californian aesthetic survive transplantation into a damp English county, when the entire premise depends on being unmistakably American through and through? It doesn't, realistically speaking. That specific brand identity simply doesn't survive the trip through customs intact. This lands as an especially humiliating turn for her specifically. Every value she's marketed for 6 years, independence, self-made success, an entrepreneur too significant for any single institution to contain, now apparently means running a jam business from a rented property in England. America cooling toward her is one thing. America is vast enough to disappear into. Britain isn't built that way. It's a smaller country with a longer memory and considerably more cameras per square mile. And then, almost comically, one of their remaining defenders went on live television that same night and delivered what might honestly rank among the least convincing crisis management performances of this entire 6-year saga. She told viewers with apparent sincerity that Harry and Meghan represent authentic, deep love. Then, entirely without prompting from the host, pivoted straight into suggesting William and Catherine's relationship was somehow different, somehow lesser by comparison. The host had to interrupt her mid-sentence just to confirm, on air plainly, that yes, the Prince and Princess of Wales are in fact very much in love themselves. That's roughly the caliber of support still actively standing in their corner when it actually mattered most.
People, by welcoming Harry and Meghan back into the fold on their terms, then I don't think anyone is going to be able to respect the monarchy. I will not be able to wait for the reign of William if Harry and Meghan are welcomed back as full working royals after the unforgivable, bridge-burning, permanent, horrible behavior, deeds, and words that they committed against the royal family, against the institution.
The king reportedly learned about this by telephone call on a Sunday, of all possible days to receive this kind of news. The literal head of state finding out his own son was moving a family permanently back into the country roughly the way anyone learns their parcel got rescheduled without warning. A few days advance notice. Nothing more substantial extended to him despite the position he holds. No advance conversation, no real consultation. Robert Jobson, who's tracked this family for 3 decades, didn't soften his description of what reportedly happened when Harry and Meghan sat across from Charles back in July.
This will be an absolute nightmare for Catherine and William. It'll be a nightmare for the British monarchy. This is something they do not need. And I'm sure we'll see Harry and Meghan during the Sandringham walk. They'll start to insert themselves more and more. And Charles, as we've seen, especially even inviting Andrew to Balmoral, has been very firm that blood is blood. And I think Harry is on his route back in. And I think Meghan will probably follow too.
They arrived with a decision already made, he said. The children are coming. Granddad gets more visits. Isn't that generous of us? Jobson's actual phrase for it, holding a gun to the king's head. His verdict on Charles allowing it stood at 4 words. The king made a mistake. The palace's official statement, something about His Majesty welcoming more time with family in a private capacity, reads considerably thinner once you actually hear it out loud. That's not language describing a father's genuine enthusiasm. That's language written for a man handed a decision he couldn't refuse, trying to make it look chosen.
When she or Harry decides to leave, now he's got the upper hand with his family and the children already in school being established within the UK government culture and educational system. So this is something that Meghan does not want to do.
This is institutional weakness, stated plainly, and somebody eventually has to say so directly rather than tiptoeing around the obvious. Charles seems by every account an entirely decent, kind man at his core. He also apparently lacks the willingness to draw a hard, lasting line with his younger son when it actually matters, and the rest of his family absorbs the practical consequences of that particular gap repeatedly, year after year, decision after decision.
I'm going to bring you some facts about what this is really about. The marriage is on its last legs, and the money is running out fast. And Meghan Markle did not want to do this. Trust me.
What should have happened here was entirely straightforward, and a considerable portion of the country was saying exactly that by Thursday afternoon, in comment sections and phone-in shows alike. A public statement addressing the situation directly. Consequences that actually stick rather than dissolving after a news cycle. Titles formally, permanently removed rather than left in ambiguous limbo. None of that happened. It never has, across roughly 6 years of comparable opportunities to draw a firmer line. Here's the part that deserves real scrutiny though, and it's not really about Harry at all once you look closely.
As ever, despite her insistence that it's a smashing success, I think has been an abysmal failure. They failed out of Hollywood. We just have to look at Cookie Queens to see that. And so they're going back. They're going back in their fallback career and slinking back to the UK. And I believe it, and yet you don't believe it at the same time. And this is just going to be an absolute mess.
Coverage keeps framing this as simply a father loving his son too much to refuse him, as though that's the whole story. The worst thing anyone could say about Charles. That framing misses something considerably more important. Charles isn't only navigating fatherhood here, he's responsible for an entire institution's stability. And this decision only ever had 2 sets of feelings genuinely worth weighing against each other. The second belongs to the son who stayed. William reportedly wasn't consulted at all. He was informed after arrangements were already settled.
No, they're ruthless. I mean, Meghan, I agree. I don't think
Harry too. They're both ruthless.
Oh, there is no, I think he is weak. The problem is he's not very talented and she isn't either, and he's not very bright, but I think she is an intriguer. We've seen proof time and time again where they spring things, where they used to, for example, when members of the royal family were doing X as an engagement, they do something else to get publicity. This clearly shows, though, they're loose cannon.
Whatever Charles believes he's purchased with this decision, he spent his heir's patience to acquire it, and that reserve was never going to be limitless. Jobson said plainly what everyone close to the palace already privately accepts. Eventually, Harry gets folded back into the institution in some capacity, formally or otherwise, because the alternative is losing control of the narrative entirely, which may well be exactly the outcome Harry's been maneuvering toward from the beginning. So why does this specific timing make sense? Strip away every other explanation and one honest answer remains. They've exhausted the material. Every grievance already published, every accusation already aired, every willing family member already featured across some documentary or interview. Sit with that for a moment because it explains nearly everything that follows. 6 years running on a single product, the family itself, monetized from every conceivable angle. That's what Netflix purchased. That's what publishers purchased. That's the entire foundation beneath every interview granted. Nothing else has ever occupied that particular shelf, and the shelf has run empty.
So Meghan's Netflix deal, which involved 16 episodes of the truly horrific With Love Meghan show, was not fruitful. That deal stopped. Ted Sarandos tore up the retail agreement to sell Meghan's horrible jam and flower sprinkles. My husband! And of course, Harry's speaking engagements have been a disaster. He was earning $1 million per speech when they left the United Kingdom. It's gone down to $50,000 and the gigs are drying up. So Harry and Meghan have failed resolutely in the United States, and that's why they're coming back to Britain.
You can only sell the same family history once before the audience notices the repetition. Expect another book eventually. That's close to guaranteed. Give it a year, maybe 2, And we'll be back here discussing another interview, another supposedly telling detail about lip gloss or garden party lighting reframed as evidence of something darker. The underlying business model has collapsed, and there's no remaining revenue in that specific narrative, which means proximity to the actual institution becomes the new product. Not formal reinstatement, just enough visible closeness that it reads as legitimate from a distance. That specific illusion can't be constructed from 3,000 miles away.
They have any idea, do you think, how loathed people feel about the millions because of the way they treated the Duke of Edinburgh? You said it half an hour ago, the Queen. And that's the reason that I believe that William has an issue here. He was fine.
And his wife, JK, and his wife.
Yeah, I just think it's extraordinary, and I think that these two grifters have no idea what the United Kingdom thinks.
The financial picture underneath all this reads properly rough. Word from inside Netflix suggests considerable internal fatigue with the entire arrangement. Harry's speaking fees, once quoted around $1 million per appearance back in 2020, have reportedly dropped to a fraction of that for recent bookings. The lifestyle brand isn't struggling. By most current signals, it's essentially finished. But the single prediction that actually unsettled me came from Jobson, and I replayed the clip twice to make sure I'd heard it correctly. Expect a carefully arranged moment. A friendly photographer, Meghan photographed with local children in a pose that's been used by someone else in this family before, deliberately or not. Expect cousin photographs too, arranged for maximum warmth. That's reportedly the actual currency now.
You talked about the exile of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. You know, the one thing that we can say is that after a certain time, when the Duke was crying poor all the time and, was constantly telling his brother George VI that he needed more money, that they didn't constantly throw it in the face of the monarch. I mean, this is such a brazen and malevolent move to move back after all of the unforgivable actions, behaviors, and words that were spoken, and Dan, they are unforgivable.
Their team is apparently briefing American press outlets in careful background conversations that this entire relocation centers primarily on the king's declining health. I'd honestly like that explanation to hold up completely on its own merits, without needing further scrutiny. The health situation likely factors into the timing somewhere, realistically. But treating it as the whole picture requires ignoring an established, recurring pattern that stretches back years. When Prince Philip was hospitalized, they were reportedly recording sit-down segments with Oprah at the exact same time. When the late Queen's own health was visibly declining during her final months, they were reportedly filming Netflix content in parallel.
Think looking back at this meeting with Charles and them not telling him, I think they were gauging how he would react to something like this, trying to figure out how soft he would be. And they're clearly seeing weakness and they want to pounce because they know if they wait until William is king or if they do it too late, William can basically undo all their royal titles and everything. And the royalty is the only thing that's selling for them. So they desperately need to reestablish.
Skepticism here isn't remotely unreasonable given that track record. It's been earned repeatedly through their own past behavior. Now here's a detail that's gone almost entirely uncovered elsewhere, and it might honestly be the single most revealing thread running through this entire story. Two separate national newspapers ran essentially identical coverage on the exact same night, within the exact same hour, matching quotes and matching phrasing throughout nearly every paragraph. Both outlets independently labeled their version an exclusive. That's not independent journalism operating in coincidental parallel. That's a single source distributing identical material to multiple chosen recipients simultaneously, then letting each one claim ownership of it separately. Calling something exclusive loses meaning entirely when two competing papers publish it together, word for word. That's a coordinated release with separate bylines attached afterward.
It's difficult for the king is, as we said, he wants to meet his grandchildren. He wants the meeting to take place. I'm sure you've got William there saying, Dad, you've got to be really, really careful because this could completely backfire. And I'm sure William doesn't want it to backfire, but I think there's been already quite a few occasions where William's probably turned around to his father and sadly said, see, Dad, I told you so. And it's really awkward for the king because, this is his son he probably knows his son is right with what he's saying, but he's still a father, he's still a grandfather, and he's still trying to do that job as well.
Nobody broke this story. Somebody distributed it, deliberately, to a pre-selected list. And Jobson supplied the detail that completes the picture. The release reportedly went to the paper closest to palace circles and separately to the Daily Mail specifically, notably absent from that carefully curated distribution list. The one publication that recently defeated Harry decisively in court. The specific outlet he reportedly owes a fairly substantial legal settlement to following that ruling. According to Jobson, that particular omission wasn't remotely coincidental, and frankly, it's hard to disagree once you consider the timing and the stakes involved for everyone concerned.
Netflix money has run dry, that house is dilapidated allegedly, and so now they're going crawling back. Okay, and I think Harry and Meghan, I think they're going to try to push Archie and Lilibet onto George, Charlotte, and Louis. I think they want all the cousins to be friends. I think they want the kids to come up in the next generation. You have Northwest and Mason and all the little ones coming up. I think Harry and Meghan, that is their plot. But this really just is interesting timing that they have the judgment. He's going to have to owe a lot of money. Their finances don't seem to be in great shape.
Someone compiled a list carefully. Someone deliberately excluded one specific name from it. This wasn't news-breaking organically. This was a managed release, and the guest list alone demonstrates as much. The underlying transaction here isn't subtle in the slightest either, once you actually trace the pattern through carefully. Favorable coverage now reportedly buys priority access to everything later. First photographs the moment that plane actually touches down. First public appearance afterward. Every subsequent milestone moment worth capturing on camera. Those specific images carry real, substantial commercial value to whichever outlet lands them first, which explains why coverage warms noticeably in the lead-up, with nobody involved particularly eager to explain the mechanics of it out loud to their own readers. So let's stop describing any of this as news simply breaking on its own.
And they're persona non grata. Here in the United States, they just aren't that popular anymore. Harry and Meghan's stories don't move the needle. This is the biggest story we've had in years. But it goes to show you, Meghan Markle stands for nothing. Because she said these people drove her to want to take her life, that they ruined her mental health, they treated her horribly, she was crying, they had to flee the country. Clearly, everything was fine because now you're running back the second you need a little bit of dough. And PhD, Papa has dough. So they're going back to King Charles. And it's just like clockwork, it's textbook. Everybody can see through it. It's so transparent.
Nothing broke organically here. Something was carefully placed, with one specific outlet pointedly excluded from the arrangement. The same outlet that had just finished beating this family thoroughly in a courtroom weeks earlier. Draw whatever conclusion feels most appropriate from that particular detail. I've already drawn mine, and I suspect you have too by this point in the story. So what actually happens once this move is complete? Kelvin Mackenzie ran The Sun for 13 consecutive years. Long enough to develop a properly sharp instinct for exactly how British public sentiment shifts once patience truly runs dry with a particular public figure. His forecast arrived without much hedging or diplomatic softening around the edges. Real, tangible risk of public booing. Somewhere specific, sometime soon after arrival. Alison Pearson raised the question nobody satisfactorily answered across a full 6 years of intensive coverage. Who specifically actively wants this couple's return to British shores? Followed immediately by the sharper version of that same question. Whatever became of Britain being the racist, toxic country she supposedly couldn't survive living inside a moment longer? That particular question has gone unanswered consistently through every available opportunity across 6 years to address it directly and honestly.
Clear that Meghan Markle, the last thing she wants to do is to return to the UK, where she will get an even more icy reception than she gets in the United States. And her reception in the United States these days is pretty low. So she, at every turn, I think there's going to be peril for her. So I am completely in agreement. You know, there's trouble between them. I have to say, I feel for the king because this is something that could really be so stressful for him in the health crisis that he is enduring, that it's really too much to bear.
Here's the version that should genuinely follow them through arrivals at the airport, whether they're prepared for it or not. If everything said back then was accurate and true, returning here voluntarily, with your own young children in tow, looks reckless in the extreme, bordering on irresponsible parenting. If it wasn't accurate, the entire foundational narrative that funded 6 years of content simply collapses under its own weight. Either the danger was authentically real, and this specific decision is deeply irresponsible given what they've claimed, or the danger was manufactured from the very beginning purely for commercial purposes. Jobson believes the monarchy risks looking properly chaotic without noticeably firmer management going forward from this point onward. And remarkably, on the exact night this story broke publicly, one commentator suggested on live national television that William should reportedly be bypassed entirely in favor of Harry ascending instead. Henry IX, she apparently called it, delivered with what sounded like complete sincerity rather than any obvious irony. One person's fantasy scenario, certainly, nothing more substantial than idle speculation, but it went out on national television in this country within hours of the announcement landing, which says something meaningful about the current atmosphere, regardless of how seriously anyone in that studio actually took the suggestion at the time.
They were so lucky to be allowed back into the United Kingdom, because I can tell you that this government that we have at the moment are trying to tighten up illegal immigration, and they're trying to keep certain characters out of the country who have no right to be here. And I would include Harry and Meghan as two unwelcome aliens after everything they've done to the country.
So, returning to where this started, why now specifically? Not primarily the finances, though those are reportedly running thin behind the scenes. Not exclusively Charles's health either. Whatever version gets carefully briefed to American outlets by their team. The actual driving force here is timing itself, plain and simple. Charles says yes to requests William would refuse outright without a second thought. The moment William actually holds the crown himself, every current arrangement, titles, privileges, whatever informal access currently exists through Charles's goodwill, disappears the instant he takes over. So the window had to open now, specifically, while the more permissive king still occupies the throne rather than his considerably less forgiving son. That's reportedly why this arrived through a brief phone call rather than an actual, sustained face-to-face discussion between father and son. This was never fundamentally about a son quietly missing his father's presence in his life. It's about a brother carefully tracking a steadily narrowing window of institutional opportunity before it closes for good, and moving decisively while that window still remained open to him. Draw your own conclusions from that timing, but don't call it a homecoming. Nobody arrives home 4 weeks after informing their own father of essentially nothing beforehand. That's not reconciliation. That's a deadline with a flight number attached to it. You already know what the public verdict was that night without me needing to spell it out further. Out of every comment posted, one line rose consistently above everything else. 3 words. William, stand strong. He's going to need every bit of it. So what do you think? Is this actually about a father wanting more time with his grandchildren before it's too late? Or is the timing here simply too convenient to be anything but calculated? And if you were William, watching your brother move back in without so much as a phone call first, could you actually stand strong the way that comment section is demanding? Or would something eventually have to give? Let me know your honest take in the comments. I read every single one. And if breakdowns like this one are what you come here for, go ahead and subscribe to Palace Insider so you don't miss the next one. And drop a like on your way out if tonight's story kept you watching to the end.